Hello everyone at home, hello everyone here. I think it's exactly 5 years almost to the week, because it would have been true around the day that I became chair. And then last time I was in this room was when I officially handed on to yourself, Sarah. So it's very nice to be back. I'm going a bit off piece tonight, I'm afraid. That we'll decide at the end whether that was a good thing. So I think when Sarah asked me to give this talk, I'm trying to find the right talk. Which talk shall I give? It's that one. Yeah. So when Sarah gave me this, asked me to give this talk on perfect action, I happened to be rereading one of my favourite books, which is called Narcissus and Goldmund by Hermann Hesse. Has anyone read it in the room? A few. Okay, good. So I thought, so that book's going to feature a little bit, and some of the themes within that are going to feature alongside kind of my own story, really. And then I bought a couple of other books that may or may not feature, depending on what I end up talking about. So whenever I think of the Buddha's Eightfold path, so this path of, I think of it as the path of vision and the path of transformation, which are different ways of looking at those limbs, the 8 limbs of the Eightfold path. And I'm taken back to a very particular time in my life. I'd just come back from my ordination retreat. So this is just over a decade ago. And I was still living at Taraloka at the time. Can't remember if Singhamati had arrived yet or not. So you can kind of imagine me. So I've just spent 3 months up a mountain in Spain being ordained. And during that retreat, I had a very strong kind of connection with the historical Buddha. And I completely fell in love with the robes that I was wearing. I chose to shave my head. I had a very strong connection with with a sense of lineage in a way, coming from me through Sangharakshita, all the way back to the Buddha, through all the people who'd walked in the time of the Buddha. We often have this phrase, don't we, the footsteps of the Buddha. And often when I was on that retreat at Akashvana in Spain, I'd be walking backwards and forwards, kind of reciting different passages from the Dhammapada, and just really feeling like I was walking in the footsteps of the Buddha. It was a very particular time in my life, a very particular experience. And when I came back, even though I was still in a retreat centre, which is certainly not an urban environment like Birmingham, I felt like, who am I now? So Singhamati was born in that context. I was ordained, I was given my case, I was given my name in this context where I felt so kind of in touch with this myth, if you like, this quite monastic myth in a way. And when I first got back to Taraloka, I found it really challenging to take my robes off. You know, it's like they'd just become part of who I'd been born into. And I didn't know how to make this transition. Who was Singhamati in jeans and a t-shirt? It was like I didn't know. It felt like I'd been birthed in a very particular experience. And so I went to Sadhanandi, my good friend, who was chair of Taraloka at the time. And I just kind of talked to her about this experience. And she gave me this book, Narcissus and Goldmund, to read. And she talked about these 2 paths, the path of vision and the path of transformation. And she said, the thing is, Singhamati, in the spiritual life, sometimes you're in a phase, maybe it's a day, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's a week, maybe it's a year, where you're really walking that path of vision. And she said there'll be other phases of your life where you're walking the path of transformation. And I was thinking about this earlier, and I was thinking, I think this is one of the mistakes that we commonly make, that I commonly make, is I mistake the spiritual path only with the path of vision. So when we're in that path of vision, we're in love with the Buddha, we can feel his presence, we're on retreat maybe, or we have a really good meditation and we feel really at peace, or our heart just feels open with loving kindness and we connect. We're having that moment, that experience of the path of vision. And we think, this is it. This is why I'm here. This is what I'm trying to do. But actually, the path has these two aspects, the path of vision and the path of transformation. And quite often, in my experience anyway, the spiritual path, the real grit of it, in a way, is on this path of transformation. And in a sense, you could say that's the path of perfect action, perfect action being part of this limb of the path of transformation in the Eightfold Path, but it's also the limb of the Eightfold Path, which is talking about ethics and the practice of ethics. And I think that really it's that kind of sense of the path of transformation. So it hadn't been the first time in my life, in my spiritual life, where I kind of got into a bit of a knot about this kind of belief in a way, or this view that part of me held, which felt that, if I was really going to live the spiritual life, then surely I would be like living a more monastic life. That's, if I was going to have an effective spiritual life, surely that's what it would look like. It's not the first time in my life where I'd had that thought or sat with that question. In fact, the first time I went to meet Sangharakshita when he was living here in Moseley. Couldn't tell you when that was. I asked him this question because it was very much on my mind. I said, but Bhante, surely if we're going to make any progress on the path, surely if we're really taking this seriously, that's what we do. We'd lead a more monastic life. And of course, Sangharakshita had lived a monastic life for a phase of his life. So he kind of could really talk from that experience in a way. And he just looked at me and he said, no, the monastic life isn't necessarily radical. If you want to be radical and you want to make progress on the path, you need to review every action of your body, speech, and mind. That's what it is to be radical. That's what it is to really live a spiritual life. That's what perfect action is to really review every action of our body, speech, and mind. I know that I think I'm remembering rightly another friend, Dharmacharani, telling a story of saying to Sangharakshita, how do I become more like you? And he said every night before you go to bed, review your whole day and review every action of your body, speech, and mind for that day. I don't think I've done that once, but good luck to you. Anyway, back to Narcissus and Goldmund. So that's, in a way, when Sadhananda gave me this, when I was sitting in this kind of question and, this kind of tension in myself of like, who am I? Singhamati arose in this particular context and, surely, what does it mean to let go of that more monastic path? What does it mean to step into the world and to express my practice in that way? So she gave me this book, partly because it's a story of two really good friends who guide each other. But they're also two friends that are on very different paths. So Narcissus is a monk, and Goldmund thinks he's going to be a monk, but realizes that actually that really isn't his path. And he takes a very different path in the end. And towards the end of the book, they come back together, and Narcissus, who's a monk, says to Goldmund, he says, "I'm learning a great deal from you, Goldmund. I begin to see what it is that artists do. Till now, it never seemed to me that their art, in comparison with my thought and science, was a thing to be taken very seriously. I would think more or less in this way. Since man, after all, is a dubious alloy of matter and spirit, and since his spirit can bring him to the knowledge of eternity, whereas matter can only draw him down into death and fetter his soul to all that perishes, he should strive away from the senses to the spirit, and so exalt his life and give it meaning. Only now do I begin to perceive how many paths lead us to knowledge. That study is not our only way to it, and perhaps not the best to follow. Certainly, it is mine, and I must keep to it. But I see you by the opposite way, the way that leads through the senses, reach as deep as knowledge as any most thinkers achieve, of the essence and secrets of our being, and a far more living mode of setting it forth." That went over your head, don't worry. But I think there's just something really in there of this kind of this seeing, in a way, of Narcissus, of just saying, yes, I realise now there are different paths. And I think that was partly what I needed to see, that I needed a story, in a way, to kind of give me heart, give me courage, give me a kind of myth, if you like. That's what stories do, don't they? To think, oh, there are lots of different ways to perfect action. The spiritual life doesn't look one way, it looks your way, and your way, and your way, and your way. Yeah, and that's perfect action in a way. So what is it to find our way? Yeah, what is it for perfect action, for our own spiritual lives to manifest in our own shape, in your shape? Yeah. And in a sense, this is the next major thing that I want to talk about. So the first bit that I was talking about really was just like, don't get lost in thinking the spiritual life is a certain way of living. It's not. Yeah, it's really about your really living your life and your spiritual life and your actions of body, speech, and mind, considering them very deeply. And then this next bit, the talk, in a way, is this theme of individuality, you could say, which I think is another one of Sankaracharya's great teachings, the path of the true individual, which he writes so beautifully about in What is the Sangha. So yeah, we need to kind of find our own way and to kind of know what the spiritual life looks like for us. And this is another great theme in this book, in a way where Narcissus, as a spiritual friend of Goldmund, is trying to help him know himself, yeah, and to know himself so that he can live his path. Yes, not because in a way, when Narcissus and Goldmund first meet, Goldmund's trying to just be like Narcissus. And that's so easy to do, isn't it? We look up to our spiritual friends or people that we admire or we think are further along on the path or whatever. And we think, I want to be like them. But we're not them, we're us. So how do we learn, how do we as friends, help each other to become more and more ourselves, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to become more and more ourselves, more and more of a true individual. And I'm just going to share one more passage from the book, which is where Narcissus and Goldmund are in this kind of thick of this dialogue about friendship, and where Narcissus in a way is really trying to help Goldmund wake up to who he is. And when the book talks about waking up, it doesn't mean enlightenment in the sense that we would mean waking up. I don't think you could see it like that. I think it more just means kind of to have that self-knowledge of oneself. So Narcissus says to Goldmund, he says, listen, I am only your superior in this. I am awake, whereas you are only half awake, and at times your whole life is a dream. I call that man awake who, with conscious knowledge and understanding, can perceive the deep, unreasoning powers in his soul, his whole innermost strength, desire, and weakness, and knows how to reckon with himself. The task that brings us together, the whole aim and purpose of our friendship, is that you should learn from me how to do this. In you, Goldmund, nature is intellect, consciousness, and the world of dreams are set very far from one another. You have forgotten your childhood, which still tries up from the depth of your being to possess you. It will always make you suffer till you heed it. But enough. Awake, as I said, I am your superior. I am stronger than you so that I can help you. But in all other things, you are mine, or rather you will be when you know yourself. So in a sense, I think it's just the reason I share these passages is partly because I think it's just nice to kind of draw on the kind of wider literature at times, but also because I think it kind of more poetically evokes this sense of friendship and how us as friends can help each other to kind of ripen in our knowledge of ourselves. So in a sense, this book is just an image of that. You know, when I went to Southern India with this tussle of like, I don't know how to be, I don't know who to live. And she gives me this book, yeah? So she's a friend and she gives me this book and she says, read this, it will help you. And it did help me. It helped me really understand and explore not only the power of friendship, but also the power of different lifestyles, and this kind of, this momentum to become awake to our own personal myth, if you like, within the spiritual life. And tonight I have Singhamati and Singhamati here, who I'm in a chapter with. So when you're ordained, order members tend to meet, not always, but tend to meet in what's called a chapter, so a group of different order members every week or every couple of weeks. And we were meeting via Zoom was it last week? And we were talking, the conversation got to this place where we were exploring personal myths. You know, what does the spiritual life mean to us as order members? And we were talking about kind of awakening and enlightenment as part of that conversation. You know, was that part of our myth? And I said, for me, you know, sometimes, you know, as I described to you earlier, I've had phases in my life where the Buddhist felt so present, where that lineage has felt so present. And I've had other times in my life where it's like, I don't really know what that means. So what does that mean to be a Buddhist? You know, like, it's not linear either. It's like that's come after that. kind of more mythic Buddha experience. And I said to my chapter, I said, sometimes I don't know whether what it means for me to believe in enlightenment. I don't know. If I'm truly honest, right at this moment, I don't know what that means for me. But what I do know is what is most important to me, what I can touch the earth with, what's been consistent through my whole of my practice over the last 20 years has been this kind of momentum to need to speak the truth. Yeah. So when I was ordained, I was given this name, Singhamati. So Singha means lion. And I was very much given, when Parami gave me the name, she said, well, I'm giving you the name because your myth is about speaking the truth and roaring like the lion, even though you find that really hard to do. And I do. I hate telling people what I think sometimes. I mean, clearly, sometimes it's fine. But, when you got that thing to say that's going to be difficult for someone else to hear, I'd really rather not. And yet that is my myth. Like I can have confidence in that. And I can have confidence that is my path of perfect action, in a sense. Yeah, this kind of propensity or momentum or commitment, devotion, however you want to put it, to kind of speaking the truth into the world. The lion's roar is what I stand by. How are we doing for time? Got plenty of time. So in a way, I think it's a really interesting area to explore, this whole area of kind of personal myth. And, some of you are ordained, and maybe your name does represent or draw something of a personal myth for you. But even if you haven't been ordained and you have no intention of being ordained, then you can still explore this area of personal myth. And I think what's interesting in the personal myth when in one's name as an order member is that you don't choose that name. So it's the person who ordains you, what resonates with you, has witnessed your practice probably over many years before you're ordained. They give you a name that they think resonates with you and your practice. So it's very much about this spiritual friendship. Yeah. So perfect action is part of that spiritual friendship. So if you're sat there thinking, I have no idea what my personal myth is, go away and ask a friend. Go away. That could be homework for all of you. Yeah. Go away and ask a friend, what do you think my personal myth is? What do you think what do I come back to? Yeah, so you could say, well, what is a personal myth? So for me, that personal myth means something of, the kind of core, not in the sense of self, but a kind of commitment to something, a kind of way of being that's deeply important to who you are and part of who you are. And that's part of being awake to yourself. So who are you? Who are you? What's important to you? What does your practice look like? Yeah. So yeah, they're questions you can explore on your own. But I would also really, really encourage you to explore them with a friend. So I've got 2 open points. Trying to decide what order to do. So when Parami gave me the name Singhamati, as well as encouraged me to roar, to speak the truth, she also said, but don't forget, lions spend most of their time sleeping in the sun. I forget this. So any of you who know me know, like, even despite not having a lot of physical energy sometimes, I am quite an active person, yeah. I've got quite a lot of energy. I'm quite out there in a particular kind of way. So in a talk on perfect action, I also wanted to talk just put a little mention in to perfect action as non-action. Yeah. So the lion sleeping in the sun. It's true. I've only seen lions once. It was at Dudley Zoo, I believe, and I didn't hear them roar once. They just slept. So yeah. So I think in Buddhism, we often we hear this quote, don't we, from the Buddha's final days, or where the Buddha says, "With mindfulness, strive on." There's definitely this kind of emphasis on striving and roaring, and and effort's great, but also there's this non-efforting, this non-actioning, and sometimes some of us, again, it's an area you just got to know yourself. Are you someone who needs to step back and learn to lie in the sun, or are you someone that needs to make a bit more effort, do a bit more, roar a bit more, strive a bit more? Yeah. And life has different phases. So my current favourite book that I'm currently reading is called Wintering. Such a beautiful title. I'm only 100 pages in, so I can't really tell you much about it. But there was this section that I totally loved, that I wanted to share. So she's talking about wintering. And she said, doing these deeply unfashionable things, slowing down, letting your spare time expand, getting enough sleep, resting, are radical acts these days, but they are essential. This is a crossroads we all know, a moment when you need to shed a skin. If you do, you'll expose all those painful nerve endings and feel so raw that you'll need to take care of yourself for a while. If you don't, then that old skin will harden around you. It's one of the most important choices you'll ever make. So yeah, I think there's times in our lives where we need to winter. We need to slow down. We need to lie in the sun. We need to practice non-action. And in a sense, part of me stopping being chair and exploring different parts of my life was to create a bit more space in my life for wintering. Don't know how successful I'm being at it, but I'm at least attempting to open to that part of me that likes to lie in the sun and play in the garden and just have a simpler life. So just remember that perfect action also includes non-action. And then the last thing, a last bit of thought I wanted to have. It was something about, I felt like I couldn't give a talk on perfect action without talking about perfectionism. I don't know why. I'm not. Put your hand up in the room if you're a perfectionist. Oh, that's quite a lot of you. That's almost half of you. Okay. What about at home, Matty? Give Matty a wave if you're a perfectionist. Got many waves?
I'm trying to see the foot. Oh.
Quite a few. Yeah, a few.
Yeah, there's a few going on.
Yeah. So perfect action. That's it's definitely a kind of, if you're a perfectionist, you will hear that as, oh, the Buddha said, yay, perfectionism. That is not what he meant by perfect action. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about mixed motives, because when we talk about ethics, we often talk about intentions, don't we? And what's your intention behind your action of body, speech, and mind as the kind of most important thing. And I'm not in any way saying that that's wrong, but I also just want to say, #life's complicated. Yeah. So we have mixed motives. And probably, I reckon, all the way up until Enlightenment, that will be the case. So I remember being, it's another ordination story, so it's funny how they're coming tonight. But yeah, I was on my ordination retreat and I'd been reflecting on this kind of pure, perfect motivation. And I said to Parami, I said, oh, maybe I need to stop. I was running a young Buddhist project at the time. I was young then. And I said, maybe I need to stop running that project because I think there's just a bit too much of my ego involved. And she looked at me like I'd gone half crazed. And she's like, but that's good action. Think of all the people that you're helping. And yeah, okay, we've got mixed motives. So what? Do you know? And it was so helpful for me because it's like, it's so easy to kind of hear something like perfect action and think, oh, my motives aren't pure. I better not do anything. I think, you know, and equally, a couple of days ago, I was talking to a friend about running our next Breathworks Mindfulness for Health course, which starts in June. And I said, oh, I don't know. It's just part of me that just doesn't, you know, wants to do my wintering. And she said, well, I said, I don't know. There's just part of me, you know, I just said, well, look, you know, part of me just wants to sit on the sofa and never sure that I really want to leave the house again, to be honest. And she said, yeah, she said, I always felt like that. And I felt like that for years. And I thought, oh, it's not just me then. It's not just me that has resistance to doing stuff, you know. And I just thought, oh, okay, why do I see resistance as a problem? It's just part of life, you know. I just, you know, if I'd have, when I think about doing anything, I think, well, you know, I just think, oh, it's the effort, you know, or the kind of, but in the doing of it, I love it. Yeah. So I've just run a Going Deeper course, which some of you did on meditation and poetry. And every week preparing for the class, I was like, oh, class. Could just be lying in the bath. But I loved it. I loved every week of it. I loved that contact with the Sangha. I loved exploring those poems. So I just think, I just wanted to give a shout out there for mixed motives, because actually resistance and mixed motives are just part of being human. And whilst I encourage you all to listen very deeply to yourselves and do what you need to do, it's also okay to do things from a place of mixed motives, be that duty or ego or confusion, or sometimes we just have to do the next right thing. Not to go into a Disney Frozen song, those of you who know it. Okay, that's probably me, I think.